Hi, my name is Reed Silverne, and the name of this show is Fed Pride. The reason it's called Fed Pride is because I'm a federal worker, and I'm proud of it. Nothing I'm about to say has been cleared through my agency or any other agency of the federal government, and nothing has been approved by a public affairs officer of my agency or any other agency of the federal government because even I don't know what I'm about to say. I'm going to talk about some various things. I've been reading the Federal Employees News Digest, which is a very good weekly magazine that a lot of federal employees ought to get, really come down and talk about a lot of the issues that federal employees should be thinking about and often don't do, like what is the budget going to do to you? What is Congress about to do to you? These people keep track of all the various committees of Congress, what the Republicans are saying, what the president is saying, and so on and so forth. This has been a pretty lean news week. The main news story that's, of course, gotten most press coverage is the fact that Dole is quitting the Senate and just going out there and just going to be a candidate. He's either going to go to the White House or his own house, or he's out of there and nobody's going to hear from him again. He's about 22 points behind right now, and he's a better friend to the federal worker than some of the other Republicans, but still not a tremendous friend to the federal worker. To give him a lot of credit, he doesn't seem to go around bashing feds much more than, or as much as some of the Republicans have in the past. He has some respect for the work of government since he's been sitting there in the Congress for the last 35 years and in the Senate for the last 27, voting for most of the programs that the people want and that the people have, and some that the people say that they don't want anymore. So he's been there. He's unfortunately got a record as long as your arm, and he's pretty much voted for everything that the common wisdom is against today. He's voted for affirmative action. He's voted for higher taxes. He's voted for more federal regulation. He's voted for the Clean Water Act. He's voted for a lot of things that Gingrich and some of the other newer revolutionary Republicans say that they're against and that his party is against. And so he's not going to go off and do something terribly radical. And but on the other hand, he is a Republican. He does believe in smaller government. At least he's parroting that line right now. He does believe in lesser benefits. He is completely. He seems to be pretty much anti-union, and of course, there are federal unions out there that protect, in some ways, the federal worker, although they don't have the right to really collectively bargain over anything that's important. They can bargain over the grievance, and they can bargain over some working conditions. They can't bargain over salaries or wages or anything that's really absolutely vital. And of course they don't. But they don't like Dole very much either. Then of course we have Clinton, and Clinton is a Republican, is a Democrat. He's been president for the last 3.5 years. He's running again. And he's supposed to be a big government liberal according to the Republicans, but he's cut hundreds of thousands of federal worker jobs, about 280,000, and he's has a lot of contracting out that he's been for, and trying to take some government jobs and turn them into private jobs in some of the depots over at McClellan Air Force Base and some other places. And he's done a lot of initiatives and a lot of reinventions, whatever that means, and a lot of stirring up and changing the way the government works. Some of it's been pretty unsuccessful, and some of it's been somewhat successful. But all in all, he hasn't been a particularly good friend to the federal worker since he's managed to get rid of 280,000. He hopes to get rid of many, many more, perhaps 400,000, before the end of his second term, if he has a second term. So he hasn't been so great for the federal worker either. I don't know whether we have a situation of the lesser of two evils or the best of two bad worlds, but right now it's either Dole or Clinton, and I think the federal worker is just going to have to sit back and see who's going to kick him harder and who's going to do the most damage. Now, some of the things that we got going over here, that's interesting to me is what's going on with the intelligence agencies. There's massive cuts going on in the intelligence agencies. There's been a report of bad accounting in one of the most important National Security Agency, or NSA, where they apparently lost $4 billion and now have found it. And they've been written up by GAO and who knows who else. GAO is an agency of the Congress, not of the executive branch of government. And right now, what they're trying to do is to get rid of all the old cold warriors and bring in new blood and bring that up. Now, anybody who knows anything about the federal RIF system knows that that's a very, very hard thing to do, since the federal RIF system is based on seniority, how many years you have in, veterans preference, and disabled veterans is, of course, the highest preference. Veterans preference is the next highest. So they have job security, even if they're younger than maybe one of the older people. Of course, a lot of people in the intelligence agencies are veterans. And the way the RIFs work, depending on what your RIF score is, and of course, your not only does your seniority taken into account, but also your performance evaluations. If you have a higher performance evaluation, you get so many extra years of service credited to you for RIF purposes. So somebody with an excellent evaluation for 3 years get an extra 4 years of credit over somebody who just has above average credit or performance evaluations for those 3 years, and so on and so forth. So you can get a very big advantage and work your way up higher on the scale through your efforts. So it's not a completely seniority-driven system. I mean, there is a performance-based component of it, but it's primarily seniority-based, except for the preferences. And of course, those preferences are out there. So they're trying to figure out a way to drive out the old timers and keep the new timers. And one way, of course, is to select jobs that the old timers are sitting in. And if they do that, I personally believe that they may get hit with an age discrimination suit. And I don't know if they'll be allowed to do that. And the other way, of course, is to do that through incentives. One of the most interesting incentives that's being talked to for the NSA, one of the reasons that people who've been on the federal government for over a decade never leave is because the old CSRS, which is a civil service retirement system, is set up to discourage people from leaving and to encourage people to go through the entire career of 30 years and to be able to retire at age 55, which is relatively young in relationship to other retirement systems like Social Security and most company retirement systems where retirement is around 65 instead of 55. But you have to do that service throughout your 30 years. You don't earn any Social Security, but of course, on the other hand, even though you're putting in a retirement percentage into your salary, you're paying toward it, you're not paying any Social Security tax. Why should you get Social Security for these older federal workers? So they don't earn any Social Security. They don't earn any kind of retirement that's really transportable. And the retirement that they do earn, if they don't actually make it through the 30 years and they don't retire at 55, if they go through it and they just leave the government, they do get credit for those years. But the way it's calculated is they get calculated on the basis of the highest 3 years of salary. And that is not indexed up to the salary or the value of that salary when the person retires. And the other catch is you can't get your retirement until you're 62 if you have a break in service, if you've quit and then don't come back. You lose, instead of being able to retire at 55, you have to get your retirement at age 62. And you lose that 7 years completely, plus you lose the inflation value of the retirement when it finally is calculated, when you finally get it. And the result is the losses are so great that most civil servants will do anything to stay in the government and complete their 30 years and complete their official retirement, or they won't go. Now, they have offered early outs where you get 5 years credits of years or age either way. and a lot of people took it. And the buyouts really only incentivize people who are going to retire or who qualify for early outs. And they found out that 80% of the people taking the buyouts are retirement age and retirement eligible. So those other people just never leave. They're going to stay there through thick and thin. They have to take a downgrade. They have to go to another agency. You're never going to get them out. If, for all intents and purposes, what they really are serfs of the state. You know, they've worked their way into a situation where they cannot leave, and if they do leave, they're going to lose a lot. And it's very, very hard to get these people out of here. Now, after a situation, you may have heard of it, there was a mole that was discovered named Ames, and it was very, very embarrassing. And they had found out that he had turned in agents throughout the Soviet Union for years. People were killed. They were murdered by the Soviet government throughout Eastern Europe and the Soviet Union itself. And secrets had been passed, and just a terrible situation. And this guy, even though they had suspected it for a long time, had been protected because he was part of the Old Boy Network. He had been around for years and years and years. So there's a lot of pressure to just kind of ease out all these old Cold Warriors and ease out the people in this whole Old Boy Network, and just bring in new people who might be able to handle a situation that's so different and so much more confusing internationally than it was at the Cold War, when there was really just two blocks competing for one another throughout the entire world. And so what they've been talking about doing is offering very, very large payments to these people to leave. And right now, if you do get an early out, you lose 2% per year of your retirement eligibility for every year you're under the 55-year limit that allows you to retire. So if you have your 30 years and you're only 53, you lose 2% per year. You lose 4% of what you would have made on your retirement. Well, that's not 2% of salary, but that's still 2% of what you would have made from your retirement. That's quite a bit. Now, what they're talking about doing is taking the value of that 2% throughout your entire life and giving it to you as a lump sum, as an incentive to leave. And that's what the NSA is talking about. And that's something just brand new and never really considered before in federal service. Now, whether that would spread to anywhere else, whether there's as big an incentive for the government to try to move so many people out and to change the balance between the younger people and the older people, trying to get some of those 50-year-olds out without having to riff out the 25-year-olds and 30-year-olds. It's hard to say. But that's basically what they're trying to do. And that is for the NSA only, but large buyouts, eligibility for full retirement benefits. We either have met the age of service requirement, but are 5 years short either way. Buyout payments ranging from $35,000 to $50,000, allowing these people to be able to keep their government health insurance for a year after they leave. And they also have what they call voluntary rifts, so that you can swap a job with somebody who is retirement eligible, and then he goes and you stay, and do everything they can to try to put out the old blood and put in the new blood and see what happens. Now, there's a lot of other retirements, there's a lot of other downsizing that's going on. They're talking about getting rid of another 15,000 acquisition workers. Those are people who are part of the acquisition workforce in the Defense Department. And, of course, they have some acquisition people in the other agencies as well. And what they do is they oversee the government system of buying weapons, mostly weapons, but also uniforms and food and everything else that's needed to maintain an Army and a Navy and an Air Force, and research and development and everything else. And they make sure the payments are right. They make sure the quality is right. They make sure the deliveries are status properly and that the contractor is doing the right thing, because the defense for most weapons system because civilians aren't allowed to buy it. We aren't allowed to have an open market where foreign countries, Iran, can go out there and just buy our latest and greatest. It's basically a monopoly. There's only one buyer for these things. And often that results in what we call a sole source situation, in which case there's only one buyer, there's one seller. Sole source, of course, is another word for monopoly. And there's a lot of regulation involved in making sure that that relationship ends up okay and that neither side, or at least the contractor side, doesn't take advantage of the government when they have it basically under their control, because that's the only place to go and they're the only people who can make it, the only people who have the data and the expertise to make these tremendous weapons. And of course the weapons buying and the acquisition system must have worked, because not only did we win the Cold War, but we just massively won the Gulf War. And the stealth fighter, for instance, very few, I don't think any, got shot down. There were thousands and thousands of sorties. Tomahawk missiles were a tremendous success. Smart bombs were blowing out bunkers and so on and so forth. They even developed some new technology just for the Gulf War itself. They developed a system just during the 6 months that the Gulf War was on, where they could dig under the minefields with these big giant bulldozers with kind of cow catchers on them and push the mines up so that they would go off and not really affect the armored bulldozers, and they could clear the minefields so they could just run the tanks right through them. And that was a tremendous success and probably had a lot to do with the success of the final battle. But these people are working out there, and they've been doing a pretty good job. But right now there's a reinvention. There's a whole bunch of initiatives that are basically reducing the oversight that these acquisition workers do. And people are saying, well, you know, the contractors are honest. They'll do a good job. Why can't we just buy a military plane? An airline buys a civilian plane, and let the contractors guarantee their own quality and status, their own deliveries, and make sure that they put in the payment schedule right and they do the right thing. I personally don't think that's going to work, but it may. You never know. And a lot of these initiatives, who'll see. But one way or the other, the plan in the 1997 budget is to reduce these acquisition positions by another 15,000 jobs. And the 1996 budget has already reduced these acquisition people by 15,000 jobs. That's 30,000 jobs all told. And I don't know how many of these people there are, a couple 100,000, but that's a big cut. And these cuts seem to be coming on every single year. And it's hard to say when they'll end or if they'll end. And these buyout authorities are the best way and the most humane way to try to cut these. So we'll see whether those continue. There's a new retirement system that's being proposed. That's going to be in the 1997 budget. I've discussed that in the past. It basically has TSP that there's no matching for, and the matching money goes into kind of another fund that grows. It's a defined contribution plan. It'll save the government a lot of money, but I think it'll hurt the federal worker. And of course that would apply only to workers that have been hired after October 1997, if that passes. And right now it looks like they're finding a lot of opposition, the Armed Services Committees, about that. So let's hope that that doesn't really work out. Both the Republicans and the Democrats are fighting over who is doing a better job of making sure veterans' preferences work and making sure the veterans get a fair shake. And the percentage of veterans in the federal workforce has dropped from 38% to 28%. And the Republicans have been accusing the Democrats of failing to use the veterans' preference and rejecting lists of candidates whose top performer or most likely to get hired is a veteran. And of course the Democrats are saying, oh, it's absolutely not true. We're following the rules and we're doing a good job. We believe in the veterans. We believe in the veterans' preference. Now, what they didn't say, and what's probably true, is that a lot of the older veterans, World War II veterans and the Korean War veterans, are starting to retire. In fact, A lot of them are retired. And a lot of even the first wave of the Vietnam War veterans, the people who were already kind of mature in the 1960s and went into the Vietnam War in those days and became veterans, even they're starting to come to retirement age, or they're turning 50, 51, 52. They've been in the government a long time because they have a lot of years in the military as well. That counts toward the civil service time. They're taking early outs. So it's perfectly logical that the percentage over the entire federal workforce of veterans should be going down by itself. And basically, once the volunteer military came in, a lot more people either stayed for their entire military career, and therefore they haven't left the military. So how can they be veterans, come into the civil service? And after FIRST came in, the reasons for going into the civil service, the retirement, the civil service retirement system that's pretty generous, really wasn't there because the FERS component for the retirement itself is not that great. So why would you? One of the reasons so many veterans did go in is because their time in the military, if they didn't make it to retirement in the military, counted towards civil service retirement time. When that's 2% a year, that's really a pretty good deal. It's only 1% a year, and for all the years that they were in the military, they weren't building up a TSP account, thrift savings plan. What's the advantage of doing that? So fewer veterans are coming in. So the percentage of veterans is going down. That's something I didn't know before, and that's kind of an interesting thing that's happening with the federal government. There's another interesting little turn and twist, and that is over in Atlanta. And everybody knows that in Atlanta is going to be the Summer Olympics, and President Clinton's going to be there. Every dignitary in the entire world's going to be there. They've already caught a bunch of militiamen with pipe bombs. They don't know exactly what they were going to bomb or who they were going to direct them at. They certainly weren't building them for fun. But there's been a lot of unease as to what's going to happen if anybody's going to make trouble during the Olympics. And, of course, the Oklahoma City situation is a little over a year old, and people are worried. Now, in the Atlanta Federal Building, they took the whole entire first floor, and they put a big, giant main post office in there. And federal workers are absolutely scared to death. Somebody's going to try to blow up the Atlanta Federal Building through a mail bomb. And the people in the post office have put magnetometers throughout this entire facility. It's probably the most secure post office in the entire country, and the one that it's least likely to try to get a bomb through because they got magnetometers and sniffers and who knows what else protecting and testing and looking at all of the items that are going through this particular post office because they're aware of that particular danger, and they really don't want to see something happen during the Olympics. So that's become a kind of an interesting problem and definitely a fear that's been going around the Atlanta Federal Building and federal buildings in general. Federal workers feel very insecure. They know that people are out there that are against them. Apparently there was another bombing just this last Friday, where a bomb went off in front of a building that had a small IRS office in Laredo, Texas. And of course, the news, the official pronouncements were it had nothing to do with that. I mean, these people didn't even know that there was an IRS office in this particular building. But how do we know that? And of course, those kind of situations have been making federal workers feel somewhat insecure. And we really do want, demand, and need more security and higher security to protect federal workers from these people that are just going off the deep end and attacking. And it's hard to say whether there's any more Timothy McVeighs out there. About a week before the anniversary of the Oklahoma City bombing, they blew up a truck that a worker for the Labor Department, actually one of the managers, and his wife were wounded in this particular truck, and that was a terrible tragedy. And of course, a few months ago, they tried to set off a bomb in front of an IRS office in Reno, Nevada, and the fuse went out, which was a lucky break because that could have killed 60, 61 people and been a follow-up to this. My name is Reed Silver, and the name of this show is Fed Pride. The reason it's called Fed Pride is because I'm a federal worker and proud of it. And thank you very much for watching, and I'll be on next week. Bye.